Welcome to Caldwell County Today. I'm Paige Counts, Public Information Officer for Caldwell County. Joining me today is Mary Mitchell. Mary is Caregiver Support Specialist. I didn't get her title right, but
you did a good
Caregiver Specialist, the way I think of it,
yeah.
with the Area Agency on Aging.
Right.
Welcome, Mary.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I'm excited. November's National Caregiver Month.
Yes.
And caregiving encompasses a lot.
It does. It covers a lot of areas, yeah.
It covers a lot of areas. So I guess let's start talking about what is caregiving and who are caregivers?
That's a good question. With National Caregiver Month, this is one thing I like to do is try to get information out there to the general public about caregivers and what they're doing. Because we have over 53 million caregivers across the United States. Believe it or not, I think before COVID, it was around 43 million. That catapulted it into 53 million and growing every day. So there are a lot of caregivers out there that are caring for a loved one at home, which can be, a caregiver can be caring for someone over the age of 60. Those are the clients, the caregivers that we serve. Or they can be caring for an older adult, an adult who is their child who has disabilities. They can be raising their grandchildren. We have a number of grandparents raising grandchildren, and we can support that with some of the services through our program as well. And caregiving can be short-term, it can be long-term, it can be a lot of things. The theme for National Caregiver Month this year is #CaregivingHappens. And so when you see that, it's like, well, I'm not sure what that means. Well, exactly what it says, caregiving happens. A lot of times, caregiving can be gradual, where maybe you're stopping off to get someone's medication, maybe bring them a meal. Occasionally, you'll go to the grocery store for them, that kind of thing. Or it can start off instantly. So you can be at work and someone gives you a call and something's happened with a family member and you need to leave right then. You can be on vacation, you can be going about your day, doing just what you normally do, and suddenly you get that call and you're a caregiver. So it happens in different ways. I always say that every single caregiver situation is different. No two are exactly alike, except they're caring for someone. You know, many times when this happens, when I mentioned about someone becoming a caregiver instantly, a lot of times we're not prepared for it. But I will tell you that the majority of the people that as soon as they become a caregiver, they take on that role with everything they have and learn as much as they can because they want to take care of that loved one, whether it's in the home or go to their house and take care of them or that kind of thing. So it happens a lot of different ways. Caregiving is caregiving situations are very different, but it's all about caring for a loved one and keeping them safe and taking care of them on this journey that they're on.
And I can speak to instant caregiving. I had a fall 3 weeks ago and broke my elbow, and my husband became he became a caregiver within seconds. Mm-hmm. And has done an excellent job. I have to brag on him because I'm not a good patient. So, I mean, all of a sudden, he's having to help me with dressing, with cooking, the chores I normally do. And actually, because I am such a bad patient, I've had multiple caregivers. My mom has stopped by to help out. Mm-hmm. So yeah. It's not just one person, right. And it can happen instantly. And this, hopefully, is a very short-term thing. Yeah. But it has taught many lessons.
I'm sure it has. And that's the thing, like I mentioned, a lot of times when we go into caregiving, we're not really sure what's expected or what we need to do as a caregiver, and over time we learn about what works and what doesn't. I'm sure with you and your husband, or when your mom comes mm-hmm. to help you, at first it felt awkward, like him. Okay, well, what do I do? What should mm-hmm. I do? But over time, he's learned a little more, and it probably goes a little bit quicker.
Things go a little bit quicker now, and he has learned a little bit more. And he's also, I've noticed, my husband's very protective now. Because he's like, I don't want you in the shower without me mm-hmm. being in the house. He's like, what if you fall again? And I'm like, please. don't say that. But I mean, he has.
Yeah.
All of this is you're a little off balance. So there are lots of things, and I think the caregiver is impacted because they have additional worries.
Yes.
And the person being cared for, I mean, my position is, I'm such a burden. And really, neither is really the case. I mean,
right.
So, I mean, that's just been my personal experience.
Right, and you brought up a good point about, a lot of times the caregiver, the care recipient, we call them, the person who's receiving care feels like that I shouldn't be this burden on that person, but most of the time, the caregiver that's caring for someone that they love, they don't see it as a burden. They see it as a job they want to do, and they want to do it right. Mm-hmm. That's the interesting thing, is that they want to do it right. And you mentioned that your husband is your caregiver. Many, many years ago, we wouldn't have heard that word. It would have been your mom stepping in or someone else stepping in. But I can tell you that over time, especially in recent years, we're seeing more and more men are becoming caregivers. And I think a lot of times in the past, it was like, well, they can't do that. They don't have the empathy that they need. They don't have that caring, that characteristic that they need. But that's not the case. It is not the case, and I'm sure you found that with your husband, that there's a whole side now that you didn't know was there, that he steps up and wants to help you in every way. He wants to make sure you're safe in the shower. He wants to make sure that you're safe wherever you go now, so that you aren't hurt again. And I think a lot of times we haven't given men that credit. Typically, if you said, who's your typical caregiver, it would have been a female in her 40s caring for a spouse, a mother, a father, or a sibling, something like that. That's not the case anymore. We're finding more and more men are doing the caregiving and doing a good job of it too, because they want to do it right.
They want to do it right. How can we support caregivers?
Well, and that's one of the things, I'm glad you said that, because that's one of the things that I try to showcase, especially during this month. In my job, I do this throughout the year, but I try to make sure that people may recognize that there are caregivers out there that they hadn't even thought about helping. So many times, caregivers don't ask for help. They take on the job. First of all, they take on the job, but don't even consider themselves caregivers. They take on the job and they do what they need to do because they want to for their loved one. But then they don't reach out to anyone for help. And many times that makes all the difference in the world. I find that caregivers a lot of times feel isolated. They feel alone. They feel like they're the only ones going through this. And so I tell the general public that odds are at someday, and I think we mentioned this, is that someday you're either going to need a caregiver or you're going to be a caregiver. Most of us are. And so if you aren't a caregiver right now and you're not being cared for, look around, think about people that may be at work, maybe in your community, maybe at church, maybe in your neighborhood, that are doing things for someone else right now. And the key is, what we can do for caregivers is reach out and say, is there anything I can help you with? Most caregivers aren't used to that. Most caregivers are used to doing it all themselves, but it's really interesting just to offer to say, can I bring you a meal this week? It takes a huge load off of a caregiver to know that that particular day on that particular meal, I don't have to fix it for myself and my loved one or whoever they're preparing the meal for. It's a huge help. So I say to reach out to caregivers and offer to help. One thing that I also talk about with caregiving is to, there may be times when a caregiver may need some respite. Any of you that have heard me talk or have been with me when I've doing presentations or in support groups, I've talked about this so much that it's really important for respite for caregivers, because so many times we take on that job very willingly. We want to do all the work, but we don't think about ourselves during that time. I know that a lot of times when you start taking on that responsibility, the caregiver thinks, I'm going to be there for my loved one. I don't need any help. I don't need anything. But then if they sit back and look, they realize that they're going, and not taking a break and not giving themselves the rest or the care that they need. And I tell caregivers, so many times caregivers feel guilty for asking for any help or for taking a break. But I remind caregivers that if you take that time to take care of yourself, It gives you that energy and the well-being to come back and be the best caregiver you can be. So it's really helping you and your loved one when you do that.
And as you were talking, I was thinking about how much our lives have changed in 3 short weeks.
Just in 3 weeks.
3 weeks, and the routines. And I feel like we're all people of routine. We find comfort in that. Well, our routines have gone completely out the window. And, you know, my husband's making sacrifices of his routine and his normalcy. And I know that as caregivers, especially long-term caregivers, their normal changes. It may change gradually, it may change quickly. But even, I feel like you even grieve that a little bit, that you're making such changes. And you may not notice it until you're like, oh, I haven't done X. I haven't gone to get my hair done for ladies in 3 months.
I was going to say months usually.
I mean, it would be a period of months. So it's a lot of things, and I feel like you kind of grieve that quietly.
Yes.
So I feel like that's a change for caregivers. There's just so many changes that they go through.
That's right. And like you said, a lot of times caregivers are going to keep that to themselves, or they may not realize that they haven't slept an entire night in months, all the way through the night, because they've been caring for their loved one. And so many times that makes such a difference, is to take a little bit of a rest for yourself, so you have that energy to come back and do for your loved one, and don't feel guilty. That's one thing I preach for caregivers, not to feel guilty, because look at the wonderful gift you're giving your loved one. You can also add to that gift by taking care of yourself. And I've had caregivers who have taken a break. We have a respite grant that we can provide, a small respite grant that we can provide for caregivers. And so with that grant, we've had caregivers who have gone out of town to a wedding. We've had caregivers to visit family out of town, in another town, while someone stayed with their loved one. And it made all the difference in the world. I can't tell you the difference it made when they came back home and said that it made such a difference just to step away. And I will tell you this, the funny thing is, many times the person that they're caring for is kind of ready for a break from them.
I was actually thinking about that, and by the end of probably, well, I'm saying about halfway through, when like after the medication's worn off a little bit and you've stared at each other 24 hours a day, and you're just like, I just want to see somebody different.
Right.
I want to do something besides watch the leaves fall off of my neighbor's tree.
Right.
I mean, you're just like...
Yes. So it goes both ways. So I tell caregivers that you may not have said anything to, like, okay, whenever I can get out of here. And get, you know?
Right. I mean, I'm thinking, would you go outside? would you
really
go somewhere? But you can't say that, because this person is making sacrifices for you, so you can't be like, get out of the house. But yeah, I can see it from both sides now, that as a caregiver, you need a break. And probably the person you're staying with, they could also use that time, you know, to see somebody new, talk to somebody new. Right.
It makes all the difference in the world. So I encourage caregivers to take that time and get a break. And one thing, and this also, one thing I did want to mention is we have a lot of caregivers who are trying to work, and either working part-time or full-time, care for a loved one, but also some are raising their family, that sandwich generation type thing. Either way, someone may be trying to work and care for a loved one, and it's tough. And so I encourage caregivers to communicate with their employer. We talk with employers in our area also to be aware of these kinds of things. Let them know about the resources we have available that we could help them, the employers, to give to their employees about this, because communication is huge with in both ways. Talking to your employers talking to their staff, and also talking with your loved one, communicating with your loved one about your feelings and about things that are going on, because I think it's really important that that communication stay open with that, and we won't go into it today, but it can also be important for communication with the extended family, because so many times there's siblings involved with caregiving, and maybe people don't agree, family members don't agree with each other and things like that, and it's so important to communicate. So I tell caregivers, going back to working, talk with your employer about this. There may be options you may have about with your schedule, with the time that you work, the times of the day that you work, and that type of thing. If you have to be home first thing in the morning to get your loved one ready for the day, then maybe you can change your schedule to come in a little bit later, maybe work a little bit later, those kinds of things, or have maybe work 2 different shorter shifts during the day to run home, be with your loved one, or fix some lunch, those kinds of things. Most employers, I think, are open to that, especially these days after what we've been through the last several years. We're much more open to things like this and being open to helping one another all the way through this. So just one point there. But going back to the respite, and I know you'll be putting up our information at the end of this. If there is a caregiver that would like information about the respite services, we would love for them to contact us, and we'll be glad to let them know about that as well.
Very important service, especially for those caregivers who are in it for the long haul.
Right.
They do need that rest.
There is one thing I also would like to mention too, that we do have, for those of us now that we're we're learning more and more technology-wise, we do have a North Carolina caregiver portal now. You can also contact me for that, and I can send you the information to get onto that. The North Carolina Caregiver Portal is a website specifically for caregivers, and it has information across the board about if you want to learn more about something and you don't have time to search the web, you don't have time to search for information like this. You can go to this caregiver portal, you log in, and I can give you the information to log in. It's very simple. And what you can do, let's say that you need more information about Alzheimer's. You go on there, there are videos, there's information to read about Alzheimer's. If you're wanting to learn more about how to help your loved one to bathe your loved one in a safe way, you can go on there and there are videos about that. I'm really excited about the one section of the North Carolina Caregiver Portal is that they're now developing more videos and information for grandparents raising grandchildren, because we do work with grandparents raising grandchildren in any way we can to help them. And they have great information now, videos about those, because one thing I will say is that there again, when I've worked with grandparents raising grandchildren, many times they feel like they're the only ones going through this, or they feel more isolated because of their situations. And that's not the case. We all know that. Those numbers are growing as well. And so I encourage grandparents raising grandchildren to go on the portal with information that might help them along the way, because so many times grandparents that are raising their grandchildren aren't up to a lot of things on technology-wise, information that's out there that their grandchildren need because they raise their children and they aren't in that field and that arena anymore. So they're jumping back into it, and there's information out there that could help them to kind of get up to speed on things again, raising their grandchild.
And again, that's something else that can happen instantaneously.
Yes.
So, I mean, you don't have time to prepare. You're just in it. In it.
And most of the time that's when it does happen very quickly. Yes, instantly. In the middle, it can happen in the middle of the night when they're on a vacation somewhere, anywhere, anytime. That's right. So,
Mary, as we talk, I think about all these people who are giving of themselves to their loved ones, and as we tape this, it's November 1st.
Yes.
We are coming up on the holidays, which I just think for a caregiver, that's adding a lot to, or can add a lot more stress.
Good point.
And so talk to us about what you tell caregivers as the holidays approach.
One thing, and you're right, yeah, that's a really good point. I know with so many times unfortunately, many caregivers are dreading the holidays coming up. And one thing that we start off with when I'm talking with caregivers this time of year is to stop for a second and let's be thankful for where we are. Let's be thankful for what we have and what we are able to do for our loved one. But then let's also look at some things that we might just change the way we look at it, because so much of this is the way we look at it and the way we handle things. Because Thanksgiving is going to come, Christmas is going to come, New Year's is going to come, either way. So let's maybe think a little bit differently about how we're going to look at all of that. And so maybe when we did all of that cooking, baking, purchasing all these gifts and everything, maybe we should change that a little bit and maybe look at it a little bit differently. And I'd almost guarantee that there are family members who would rather step up and do some of that baking and the cooking and the entertaining or hosting the meals. And that way you can go maybe step back and not do as much as you've done in the past. But remember that you and your loved one will be celebrating it together, however you celebrate it. And I have to say, with the changes that we've had now with deliveries, with being able to order your meals now from restaurants, it's not as hard. You don't have to do that. And I know if you've done it for the last 50 years, 30 years, whatever, and you've always done it that way, there again, maybe just step back for a second and think, maybe I don't have to do it this way this year. And then we can enjoy it a little bit more and look at it as a time to enjoy that time together. It may be much simpler, it may look very different, but maybe look at it that way. And then, and of course, when you go into Christmas, we are all, I think most of us should be more thankful for what we have. So a lot of times maybe it's best not to try to get that perfect present for every single person on your list. That this year, a lot of times just hearing from you and that communication, I'll go back to the communication, that going back and communicating with everyone where you are in the situation, how your loved one is doing. I think that honesty with the family, they will appreciate it more than anything else, is knowing where you are, and a lot of times being honest with others and letting your family know where you are and communicating. Someone will think, you know, let me fix your meal this year, let me bring it to you, or you come to my house. And family members will want to step up and help. So communication and the way we look at things could change things a lot.
Well, as you were talking, I was thinking, you know, maybe those family members, if you're honest with them about where things are, their support will continue well beyond the holiday. And as you move forward, that they will go, oh, we need to take a meal monthly. I know that sounds very little, but it's a help.
It's huge for a caregiver, huge, yes. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I think that's going to be, I think that would make a huge difference for caregivers so they can start to enjoy it. And maybe anyone that knows me knows how important music is. And so I always say bring that music out and listen to that music. Enjoy some of the things around you a little bit more and take some time to appreciate that. You and your loved one can. And especially all the holiday movies coming out. I think they've already been on, haven't they?
I feel like they've been on since July on some channels. Not calling any channels out, but I'm just saying.
Right. So things like that, you know, sitting back and enjoying a few moments and enjoying some time, it makes all the difference in the world. But we are so, I think a lot of times we are so task-oriented that let's get the next thing finished on the list and what we have to do next. And sometimes just taking a breath and sitting back can make all the difference in the world.
And I do think that's important. I really think sitting back and taking a breath is probably important for all of us.
It is. You're exactly right.
You know, all of us need to step back and take a breath and say,
we do.
Okay, we're going to do A, but we're not going to do B, C, and D.
Right. And it's okay, because if B, C, and D don't get finished or don't get accomplished, it's really okay. It really is. So I always say, you know, if you decorated the entire house and in the past for Christmas, maybe rethink that and, you know, simplify it a lot more. Maybe just bring out a few decorations, because you'll have so much less to put away afterwards too. So, and enjoy that for what it is.
And that's something I've had to think about, because I'm the one who enjoys Christmas and I like the decorations, but the decorations are in the attic, and one-handed Paige can't get decorations out of the attic. My husband, He's fine with no decorations. So, you know, where do we find that compromise this year? You know, maybe next year things are different, but this year maybe there's less.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Oh, yeah, it is. It really is. I think the last few years have taught us a lot of that, because I think in just recent months we've kind of hit the ground running. Like, okay, now let's get all of this accomplished, and we don't have to. I think we need to stay with some of our roots and just remember it. We don't have to do it all. Yeah.
Okay, Mary, we've hit a lot. I mean, this is something that I've felt passionate about for years. In previous jobs, worked closely with Mary.
Yes.
And there's just so much to share.
There is,
and so much to think about. And I think the one thing I want people to know is Mary's available.
Yes.
Mary, how do people reach you?
Okay, you can call or email. Could I give my number out? The office number is 828-485-4256. And feel free to contact our office, and you can leave a message and we'll get back in touch with you. My email is mary.mitchell, MITCHELL, at WPCOG.org. You can feel free to send an email. You can also go on our website. You can send a message through our website at WPCOGAAA.org.
And for those who don't know, Mary works for the Western Piedmont Council on Government's Area Agency on Aging.
That's right. That's right.
So, Mary, big picture overview, Area Agency on Aging, you do a lot to tell folks what you do. Yeah, the Family Caregiver Support Program is part of the Area Agency on Aging. And the Area Agency on Aging is an advocate for older adults in our community. And the services that are provided through the funding of the Area Agency on Aging are examples would be like home delivered meals, in-home care, in-home aid, those types of things. That we have programs that we do for exercise and healthy lifestyles and that type of thing that we offer to the community. We have a long-term care ombudsman program that also works with those who are in long-term care that do have issues or do have questions that they need about long-term care. So that's a wonderful program. You can and also I wanted to mention too, Project Care is in our office. Project Care is a state-funded program specifically for those families who are caring for someone who has dementia or Alzheimer's. And so you can contact anyone in our office and they can give you their information. Any questions that you have, feel free to call us, and we work closely together to make sure that when anyone has questions for older adults in our community, that we can we get the information to one another and make sure that you get the information you need from our office. That's what I wanted to say. So anytime, just call our office. If you have a question for the ombudsman, I'll be glad to direct you to them, or for Project Care. There's a family consultant with Project Care that can actually talk with you, come and talk with you. Yeah. So lots of resources that I think people don't realize are available to them. Right. And available to caregivers. So. Exactly. Right. Mary, thank you for being here today. Thank you. Thank you for having us here to talk about this. Or having me here to talk about this. This is wonderful. To get the information out there, to let people know that if you are a caregiver, you're not alone, and there are resources, and reach out. And also, if you know someone who's a caregiver, reach out to them and just ask them if there's anything you can do to help. And believe me, it will make all the difference in the world. It will. And when you visit with that caregiver, you may just pick up on some things that could be done. Right. They may not mention it, but... And they may not ask you, but you're right. You can pick up on it, and that will be a good way to help them. Mary, thank you for this information. It is so important for our community. Thank you for having me on here today. I appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you for watching Caldwell County Today.